All right, heading to the fifth round now to talk best and worst value picks here in the draft, and I would
Mm-hmm.
say this is where things get, positionally. This is where like anything can go. We can see quarterbacks taking this round, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. We can see people start to reach on players. Hell, there might even be a kicker or defense in some of y'all leagues, man. But but this round ADP wise is where you're going to find either some value picks that slip, or
Mm-hmm.
we're going to start to have to reach on some players that we see with a lot of upside. So there's going to be some mixed ADP in here based on the floor and upside of some of these players. But Pete, talk about the best player in your opinion during this round.
The best player, there's a lot of good players in this round here. This is one of my favorite rounds because you can really construct a strong team. The best value in this round, in my humble opinion, is going to be at tight end. Fantasy Pros has him as a top 50 player. Your tight end five, who I think is going to be the tight end one this year, is Dalton Kincaid, right? So
Tight
we're
end one.
tight end one, bro. I said it right here. P said it. He stamped it. He's a P player. You're talking about vacated targets with Stephon Diggs no longer there. And, they drafted him early, so he has a draft capital. And all of that sounds good, but you have to see it. And when did we see it? We seen it towards the end of last season. And more importantly, we've seen them lean on him heavily in the playoffs. So when you see things like that from a young player, you know his upside is crazy, right? So they have, as far as pass catchers, they have Curtis Samuel, and then they got the rookie there too,
Keon
who,
Coleman.
yeah, Keon Coleman there. But as far as like an established weapon, he goes across the middle, so I see him as a PPR threat. But not only that, he's huge, and he's lining up in the slot. So I also envision him as a red zone threat. So I wouldn't be surprised, and you shouldn't either, if you're seeing uh, double digit touchdowns out of him, as well as anywhere between 90 to 100 catches, 90 to 110 from a tight end. If his upside is that, send him especially in the fifth round. Send him.
Yeah, you talk about players that were using the playoffs from the Bills, and there's only one name that was going in the fifth round last year that I think of, and that's Gabe Davis. But we're not gonna talk about that. I like Kincaid. I like Kincaid, and I think he has good promise. It depends all on how Joe Brady wants to use him there in Buffalo. So I like the player, and I think that he has competition for targets, but he could be a value.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about best player here in the fifth round, I haven't always liked to take early quarterbacks, but if I'm
Oh.
being honest, there's one quarterback I would take in the fifth round.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, the QB6, this guy is a potential 25 point per game player, and that's Anthony Richardson.
Mm.
Now, I don't, if I could find value, if there's other value from the top four rounds that normally slips around this range, I would take them. But Anthony Richardson provides like league winning opportunity here at the QB6 position. So five other quarterbacks go ahead of him. And we know when he plays, he's a 25-point guy. How does this
Mm-hmm.
guy keep slipping in drafts? And why is he not valued as a top three quarterback? Right? He has the upside to be the QB1. The Shane Steichen's already come out and said they're gonna run him. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
run him just like normal, and that's what players are meant for. You don't hold back a player like that. And the only concern you really have with Anthony Richardson is injury. We saw it twice
Mm-hmm.
last year. So if he can stay healthy, if he really does stay healthy, and we get a Josh Allen type season out of him, Anthony Richardson is going to be the QB1. He is the most athletic quarterback we have ever seen in the NFL. And that's not me talking. That is by metrics. The
Yep.
most athletic. So you're talking about your Cam Newtons, your Josh Allens, your Michael Vick, all these players, all these athletic quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson is the cream of the crop. And we are going to get to see him in a full season this year. Already has his running back in Jonathan Taylor. Now has, and obviously his premier weapon in Michael Pittman has been re-signed. The arrows are up for Anthony
Mm.
Richardson, who I love getting in the fifth round instead of taking a guy like Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts in the third round. Get the same value two rounds later and just absorb a little bit of risk. The only
Mm-hmm.
risk is if he gets hurt. And if he stays healthy for you, watch out. You might win your league with him.
Brother, I couldn't agree more with you on that. Anthony Richardson, I'm snagging him up in a lot of leagues, and just the fact that upside, like I was saying with other players when we're talking about these lists that we have, you cannot be afraid. Yeah, he's getting nicked up. Oftentimes when you're a rookie, you got to learn how to land. You got to learn when to take a hit on the shoulder. You got to learn when to slide. And I think you're going to see that in his second year, that just overall maturity, and with the fact that this team is really on his shoulders, bro. The upside is crazy for him. So that's a
Yeah.
good pick in the fifth round.
Crazy upside, man. And obviously upside isn't everything, but it is one thing. But when you start looking at like worst players, obviously upside can be a thing. It could also be value. When you're looking at worst players, P, who you got in mind? Who are you looking at as like the worst pick here in the fifth round?
The worst pick I have in the fifth round is Zay Flowers, and we talked about how many passing yards that Lamar traditionally is going to have. The new weapons there, it seems like they're keen on running the rock, something they didn't do in the playoffs. But I see him as more as a gadget player, right? Somebody who's not going to be consistent on a week to week basis. Their top pass catcher is going to be healthy, so we can see how that factors in. But when you're looking at Zay Flowers, you're taking him. You'd have to take him in a round where you can get Amari Cooper, who is a PPR monster, T. Higgins, who has crazy upside and a high floor, George Pickens, who, if Brandon Ayuk doesn't go there, is scheduled for a breakout season. And if you're lumping him in, Tank Dell, who has crazy high upside, if you're lumping him in with those players, to me, he is the bottom of that list. And right now, you have to take him, according to Fantasy Pros, above all of those players, whom of which all those players, Malik Neighbors, crazy high upside. We see how he's killing it in camp. And he's just the bottom of the barrel when it comes to that tier of wide receivers in the fifth round. He's he ain't a P player, to say the
Ain't a
least.
P player, man. At the end of the day, when you don't have the upside, sometimes it's tough to draft you in that round because we're looking to win our league. We're not looking to just be mediocre in our league. We're looking for players that can have 1,000-yard upside or potential 100-catch upside or 10-touchdown upside.
Facts.
He ain't that player, bro.
He ain't it, man.
Yeah, I ain't giving him his flowers. As far as my worst, as far as my worst player, man, and it's not that I think he's not talented. It's just this is purely an ADP thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is CJ Stroud. Now, this is going to come off as a surprise, but CJ Stroud was a QB 11 last year and caught a lot of people off guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy for us to just be like, yo, it's his second year. He got Stephon Diggs. He's going to be better in his second year. But I just feel like, what's his true ceiling? Like, unless he throws for 5,000 yards or we're getting like a 40 touchdown season out of CJ Stroud, which in his second year, I don't see it. How are we taking this guy as a top 5 quarterback when there's other quarterbacks in the same range that rush the football and have higher upside? I honestly think his comp is like a Dak Prescott or a Brock Purdy or a Jordan Love, and we're taking him early because of the names associated around him. I love the kid CJ Stroud. I think he's a phenomenal football player, but this team also did go get a running back. They traded for one in Joe Mixon, who's going to take on some of that work. And not to mention, this Houston Texans team is going to be much better than they were last year. Mm-hmm. That's the expectation, at least. And if you're expecting that, the defense got better. They added Danielle Hunter in this offseason, they added a corner this offseason. So we know the defense is going to be improved. If you feel that way, that means the offense will probably slow down because they won't need to pass 40 times a game. CJ Stroud is a player that I like the value, and I think he might be even more efficient this year. But as far as fantasy production goes, they were coming from behind in a lot of shootouts last year. I don't see it. CJ Stroud being a little overdrafted, in my opinion, the worst pick you can make here in the fifth round. Yeah. And you're taking a quarterback. Like I talked about the value with quarterbacks later on. It's like you can find so many quarterbacks later on. CJ Stroud, man, it's tough to reach on a player that doesn't have the ceiling of being the QB1, in my opinion.
Brother. That's a lot of people aren't going to like that, but CJ Stroud is.
They never do.
Yeah, for as great as he is, it feels like in year one they wanted to see exactly what he can do. But the fact that, a lot of people don't really recognize this, he doesn't really run the rock at all. He's one of those pocket QBs. And when you got a pocket QB who doesn't run the rock at all, accompanied by a new running game with Joe Mixon, it's hard for him to really break that mold of the top 3, top 4, even a top 5 QB. Like if you're drafting a complete ceiling, which in my opinion is really unrealistic. So.
Yes, it's what I'm saying. It is what it is, man. When it comes to these fifth round picks, obviously there's a lot of talent here, and we're going to be fading some of your favorites. But Hopefully we're buying into some of your favorites as well. And hopefully you learned a little something here today, talking about best and worst picks of the 5th round. We will see you for the 6th round on the next one.
Let's get it.